that I listed off, that several officers have been injured and shot at in the course of these riots. Kristen.
Thank you, Kaylee. I have a question about the decision-making process for going to church on Monday night. The president said on Fox Radio this morning that he never told anyone to push the protesters out. The defense secretary, he said something similar. So who at the White House did know, or was this a unilateral decision by the Attorney General?
The Attorney General decided that morning to expand the perimeter, and that was a decision made long before the church discussion was ever under consideration. When the president gives an order, people act. It's not as if he's walked through each and every detail of how a plan goes about. He says, I want to go to the church. He goes to the church, and everyone executes the plan in the order that the president puts into place. So the president is absolutely right in what he said.
So was the plan still for President Trump to walk out there, even if the protesters were still there?
You know, I'm not aware of the determinations that Secret Service had as they arranged for the president to walk out there, but I would just note again that the decision to expand the perimeter was a decision made in the morning by Attorney General Barr.
Okay, just one question about the coronavirus, because we're still in the middle of a pandemic. Dr. Fauci, he said in an interview on Monday that his contact with President Trump had dramatically decreased, and so had the frequency of the coronavirus task force meetings. Is that accurate? And if so, why?
There was a coronavirus task force briefing just yesterday. We are constantly, as an administration, monitoring the coronavirus to protect the safety and well-being of the American people. Right now, we all saw that church burn. We all saw some of the violence in the streets, and the president has had several meeting after meeting with AG Barr, Secretary Esper, General Milley, to make sure that our streets are peaceful and under control, while also monitoring the coronavirus and what we're seeing develop there. Mario.
Thanks, Kylie. I'm confused. I mean, if the protests were peaceful on Monday, why did you all clear the area, and whose decision was to clear it later in the day? If Attorney General Barr wanted it cleared earlier in the day, why did it take so long for it to be cleared?
Yeah, you know, he ordered it to be cleared Monday morning. It didn't happen when he arrived, so he immediately instructed the officers to ensure that it was moved back a block. As we all saw Sunday night, it was not a peaceful protest. It was, in fact, a riot with a church burning in Washington, D.C. The president made sure that Washington, D.C. was secure Monday night, and part of that involved moving the perimeter back to ensure that St. John's Church was protected.
But that's quite a gap between the morning and then the evening when you all walked over there. Why was there such a gap?
Look, again, that's a question for AG Barr, who made the order. It's a question for the officers who were on the ground at the time, why that wasn't deployed right away. But when AG Barr came to the White House, I think it was early afternoon, he noticed that it hadn't been cleared, gave the order for it to be cleared, and that action took place.
Why did the president feel it was important to go walk over there through the park and to the church?
It was extremely important. Look, the president wanted to send a very powerful message that we will not be overcome by looting, by rioting, by burning. This is not what defines America. And going and standing by St. John's Church was a very important moment. And I would note that through all of time, we've seen presidents and leaders across the world who have had leadership moments and very powerful symbols that were important for a nation to see at any given time to show a message of resilience and determination. Like Churchill, we saw him inspecting the bombing damage. It sent a powerful message of leadership to the British people. And George W. Bush throwing out the ceremonial first pitch after 9/11, and Jimmy Carter putting on a sweater to encourage energy savings, and George H.W. Bush signing the Americans with Disabilities Act, flanked by 2 disabled Americans. And for this president, it was powerful and important to send a message that the rioters, the looters, the anarchists, they will not prevail, that burning churches are not what America's about. And that moment, holding the Bible up, is something that has been widely hailed by Franklin Graham and others, and it was a very important symbol for the American people to see that we will get through this through unity and through faith.
Secondly, the president, you said he had the results of his physical. We know that he did part of the physical late last year, I think it was. When did he have the rest of it done?
I'm not aware of an exact date. I will ask Dr. Connolly for you on that, but I know it was fairly recently. Yes. I will go to Brett.
Thanks, Kaylee. The White House has spent a lot of time talking about how the protests have taken place and how people are protesting or shouldn't be protesting. But what is the White House doing to address the underlying causes that have led to these protests?
Look, the president's done a lot. The president expedited the review, the FBI review of the George Floyd case. He swiftly ensured there was a civil rights investigation into George Floyd's death. Ahmaud Arbery, there's another investigation there on the part of DOJ. He's recognized what an injustice this was innumerable times, including in his national remarks that he gave on Saturday. So this president has done everything in his power to send a powerful message that these injustices will not be tolerated.
But does the White House or the president, have they reached out to any of these protesters to try and start a dialogue about specific reforms they'd like to see, or does the president plan to do that moving forward?
Look, the president has looked at some various, not legislative necessarily, but tools that we could use to ensure that law enforcement uses the appropriate level of force. No discussions or announcements there on that front. But I will say that we're taking a hard look at this, but that the president recognizes that our police officers are valiant heroes. The vast majority are good, hardworking people who love this country and who love the American citizenry that they protect.
Thanks, Kaylee. Former Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein testified today on the Hill that he didn't read the FISA applications, and he didn't even prepare the scope memo that started the Mueller probe. Given that Rosenstein appears to be deeply involved in Crossfire Hurricane and that he actually picked FBI Director Christopher Wray, isn't it time that the Trump administration appoints someone else other than Wray for FBI Director?
Okay, I have no announcements on that front, but what I will say with regard to the Rosenstein testimony is he said there was no there, and he now agrees with that text by Peter Strzok, who, obviously had no information of Russian collusion, but nevertheless strung us through this investigation. And you have Rosenstein, who, again, it's quite befuddling, said he wouldn't have signed off on the Carter Page FISA warrant that has his name on it. His name's signed on a FISA warrant to spy on the Trump campaign, that he wouldn't have signed off on that. Not only that, he wasn't sure that he read every page of it. It's a pretty grave thing to spy on an American citizen, to violate their Fourth Amendment rights, to not have a basis to do so, and to rely on a Russian dossier full of lies as the justification. So it's really astonishing to hear from him that he's not sure he read every page of that warrant, but I suppose it's encouraging to hear with his 2020 hindsight that he wouldn't have signed off on it, though I'm sure that's of no comfort to Carter Page.
Well, the president has expressed his disappointment in Wray in the past, so where does he stand now? Does he have confidence in Wray today?
At this moment, the president, as the FBI director, much like the Secretary of Defense is the FBI director, is the Secretary of Defense. If the president decides he no longer has confidence, you guys will be the first to know.
One more on New York, if it's okay. Sure. So yesterday, New York Governor Cuomo made a pretty big statement saying that he might relieve Mayor de Blasio, of his duties. Has there been any talk with Governor Cuomo about sending in the National Guard troops to New York, or is there any plan right now to send National Guard to New York?
The president will do whatever is necessary to protect America's streets. He has made that clear, and he has several tools. That is one of them, sending in the National Guard. He does have the ability to federalize the National Guard should he choose to do that. But I would note, and I'm very glad you brought up New York, the very clear-cut cases of D.C. and New York. D.C. was in chaos on Sunday night when you saw the burning of the church, when Mayor Bowser did not set the curfew as she had it at 11 p.m. The president said this is unacceptable. He's always preferred devolving to the states. They have the police power. It's their responsibility to protect the streets. But when the president saw that on Sunday night, he took action immediately. He surged the National Guard, encouraged states to accept their National Guard. He went on and on with several various actions. He gave a very powerful speech saying, if you don't act, I will. He noted that the military would be on hand should it be necessary. His bold action, his swift action, made D.C. a much different story Monday night. And contrasting the images of D.C. on Monday night and New York on Monday night, where there was rampant looting, where we saw Macy's department store looted, Coach store looted, violence in the streets. New York acted in a way that was inappropriate. They didn't deploy the National Guard. They set an 11 p.m. curfew, even after they saw the disastrous results of Mayor Bowser's 11 p.m. curfew. And the president said, I will call Antifa a domestic terrorist group. What was New York doing? New York was arresting people on burglary charges and then releasing 500 individuals after they had arrested them. So the weak-kneed policies of New York stand in stark contrast to the law and order policies of this president that has succeeded in securing this city, as we've seen the last two nights. Next, then we'll go to Lachlan.
Thank you, Kaylee. Putting aside the conduct of individual officers, does the president believe that there's a systemic bias in American law enforcement against African Americans?
The president believes that there are injustices, and he has pointed them out, and he has not hesitated in pointing out injustices. Going back to his time as the primary candidate, when he called Sandra Bland and the use of force against her in the video that we all saw terrible. He did not hesitate when he saw the video of George Floyd. He was really upset by that video, as I noted. We've got the civil rights investigation into Ahmaud Arbery. He points out injustices, but he also notes this, that our police officers are good people. I've seen them out there on the streets protecting people. I've played the videos for you of the police embracing protesters, standing with the protesters. They're good, hardworking people. They protect our streets. That is what law enforcement is about. But at the same time, the president will note and he will call out injustices. And this is a president who's not hesitated in doing that when the time was right.
Individual actions, but does he believe that the problem is systemic and endemic to American law enforcement?
The president believes there are some examples of injustices. He calls them out. This is a president who, when Democrats for so many years talked about criminal justice reform and the disparities, the racial disparities in sentencing, President Obama didn't do that. Guess who fixed that? It was President Trump with the First Step Act, who engaged in sentencing reform and who really rectified some of the disparities we saw there. So, I think Democrats, others, Republicans should hail this president for calling out injustices when he sees them, either in a case-by-case basis or in the form of the First Step Act, where he noted the disparity in sentencing reforms. Josh.
There's been a number of explanations on the clearing the park. One, that there was an attempt to enforce curfew. Another, that it was violent protesters from the park police. DOJ saying that it was previously going to be done anyway. Can you explain to us what the reason from the White House's perspective was for clearing the park? Why the White House wanted it done?
So it wasn't the White House. As I said, it was A.G. Barr who expanded it was A.G. Barr who said the perimeter needed to be expanded 1 block each way because we were not going to see the church burn another night. I've already gone through in meticulous detail with my friend Jem here how it came about that perimeter was eventually moved, and I'm not going to repeat myself again.
So that would have been done anyway, even if there would not have been violent protesters, that would have happened?
No, there were 3 announcements. So if the protesters had remained peaceful and had moved the perimeter as they were instructed to do, not 1, not 2, but 3 times via loudspeaker, it would have looked different. But when bricks are thrown, rest assured, officers will protect themselves. Chanel.
The president said today that he went down to the basement to inspect it over the weekend. What was the point of the inspection? What was he looking for?
Look, I won't go further than what the president has said because those are security matters, and I won't engage on that kind of discussion. Yes, Chanel.
So going back to Rosenstein, what is the president's response to the fact that neither Rosenstein nor Christopher Wray seem willing to take responsibility for the illegal wiretapping that took place on the Trump campaign? I also have a question on the Insurrection Act.
Yeah, I would say, look, the president is dismayed. This happened to the president's campaign. A Republican campaign was spied on by a Democratic presidency, a Democratic administration, based on a dossier paid for by his opponent, Hillary Clinton, and the DNC. This is absolutely extraordinary. It is the biggest political scandal that we've seen. And the lack of journalistic curiosity on this front is appalling when you have multiple instances of people who were saying one thing under oath from the Obama administration and saying another thing in public, that they had direct evidence of Russian collusion. I mean, that's extraordinary. Adam Schiff, I've got direct evidence when in fact we know there was none in the Mueller report after spending millions of taxpayer dollars, totally and completely exonerated President Trump. It was a travesty, and we hope to get to the bottom of this because it should never be done again in American politics to any president of either political party.
Insurrection Act, Secretary Esper this morning said that he opposes it. The last time it was used was 1992. How close is the White House to actually using the Insurrection Act? Is that a last resort measure, or is this a real possibility at this moment?
Well, if you've noticed, the president has been going down a line of progression. And the first point was allow governors to do their job, allow mayors like Bill de Blasio to do their job. The police power, which is embedded in the 10th Amendment of this Constitution, that's how this country is supposed to work. Governor Cuomo is supposed to ensure that his state is protected. Mayor de Blasio is supposed to ensure that New York City is protected. They failed at their job. There was looting all across New York City. There were fires burning here in D.C. when Mayor Bowser was in control. So this president on Monday took definitive action with that speech saying, if necessary, the military is here. You must surge the National Guard. He took action, and he shored up and made sure that D.C. remained peaceful. So this president has gone and said the National Guard is the next step. That seemed to be working here in New York, in D.C. We'll see if it continues to work. But rest assured, he has the sole authority to invoke the Insurrection Act, and if necessary, he will do so to protect American citizens. One thing I really want to note, and I think it's so important to go back to this because I haven't seen a ton of coverage of it other than in a few places. And I started the briefing with this, and it's important. I just want to circle back and note Captain David Dorn, who lost his life in St. Louis, and he was killed by a looter. He served 38 years in the St. Louis Police Department. His wife, Ann, is a sergeant with the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department. He is a hero. I also want to note, because there have been 45 officers lost in the line of duty this year, and my heart breaks for them. And as a new mom myself, my heart particularly breaks for two women in particular who I was reading about their stories today. Officer Breanne Leath of the Indianapolis Police Department. On April 9th, 2020, she was shot and killed. She survived by her 3-year-old son, her sister, and her parents. She was a National Guard veteran, and my heart breaks for the family of Officer Leath. And Officer Tiffany Victoria Enriquez of the Honolulu Police Department on January 19th, 2020. Officer Enriquez was shot and killed as well, leaving 3 daughters, 1 grandson, and she was a U.S. Air Force Reserve veteran. These are our heroes. Thank you so much to our officers who are protecting our streets. Many have been shot. Some have been killed. It's a travesty. And let us stand with law enforcement and recognize the huge contribution that they have made to our society and continue to do so each and every day. Thank you so much, guys.
Who's commander of the forces in Washington right now?